Afterwards, we'll have some time of prayer and prayer requests. So let's jump right into it. We're in Proverbs chapter 20. Proverbs chapter 20. I think I studied the right one. Today's the 20th, right? All right, so Proverbs chapter 20, we're just going to read the first 3 verses once I find it. That's like the easiest book to find, right? Right in the middle of your Bible, the Psalms. Right in the middle of some people's Bible, there. Okay, Proverbs 20. First 3 verses. Wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. The fear of the king is as the roaring of a lion. Whoso provoketh him to anger sinneth against his own soul. It is an honor for a man to cease from strife, but every fool will be meddling. All right, what in the world do those 3 verses have in common? I feel like they kind of go together, and I'll explain that here in a second. But first, I know we've prayed a couple times, but I feel like I need to pray for the service here, the sermon tonight. Lord, I pray for your blessings on this sermon, and I pray that you'll help give me clarity of mind and thought and convey the words that need to be said properly. And I pray, Lord, that you just help us learn from this lesson and apply it where we can apply it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. So the first verse there is clearly talking about wine, strong drink, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. That's going to be our main text this evening. But let's look at the next verse. The fear of the king is as a roaring of a lion. Whoso provoketh him to anger sinneth against his own soul. I thought about that verse in Proverbs 26:17. Says, he that passeth by and meddleth with strife, belonging not to him, is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. I like that verse. You know, you think somebody wants to. I mean, you might get by with grabbing a dog by the ears, and I don't remember which president it was, but there's a famous picture of a guy holding the dog behind the ears, and I don't know exactly what he was trying to prove, but you hold the dog behind the ears, most likely it's going to try to snap at you, and if you get bit, it's your own fault, right? Basically you sinned against your own self. So the same thing with somebody who is meddling with affairs that don't belong to them. You're just asking for trouble, and I can't help but think about our government on that. And sometimes we need to stay out of the business that doesn't belong to us and not meddle with someone else's business. But also, the next verse says, somebody's phone says, it is an honor for a man to cease from strife, but every fool will be meddling. So the same thing you see here in the verse 2 there, it talks about the king, you know. Now, we don't have a king, but we have a lot of different authorities over us. And if we are to provoke the king to anger, you know, whoever our authority is, make them upset, on purpose, we're just asking for trouble. And there's people that will do that. They're always instigating, always provoking. And so, all right, so what does that have to do with wine and alcohol? Well, here's the thing. I believe that in the same manner, if you're messing around with alcohol, thinking it's not going to affect you, you're not wise. Just like you're meddling with business that didn't belong to you, just like grabbing a dog by its ears or whatever, you're sinning against your own self by doing it, all right? Now, I don't know. I don't think anybody in here has a problem with alcohol, but you never know. And along the lines of just preaching the whole Bible, we just cover different subjects, and it's good if there's nobody for me to think about and try to preach to a specific person, but we just preach the Bible and let it go wherever it will. But the interesting thing is, whenever you talk about wine and alcohol in the Bible, people always jump to defending the certain verses that say it's okay. And so what I want to kind of show tonight is that according to this verse, I believe that and those 3 verses really, but mainly that first verse, if you'd be wise just to stay away from it entirely, okay? And so the title of the message tonight is The Wisdom of teetotalism. Now, I think most people know what teetotalism is. I'm familiar with the term, but didn't really know the etymology of it in fact, I didn't really know how it was spelled. I thought tea, like T-E-A, like you drinking tea, if you're a teetotaler. I didn't know what that meant, but so I looked it up, the word, because obviously today, when we use that word, it just means simply somebody who just stays away from alcohol of any kind. They don't touch it. A lot of times they also won't even participate in selling of it or whatever, and they call them teetotalers. Well, in the early to mid 1800s, there were many, and no doubt this was brought about by the strong preaching of the time, the revivalist preachers of the day in England specifically, and then here in America as well. But there was strong preaching, and no doubt it started these temperance societies. They looked at their society, and you're thinking, well, mid-1800s, it wasn't that bad, was it? Well, apparently society thought that alcohol was ruining homes, and it was causing men to be angry and beat their wives and treat their kids poorly. And so actually women were very heavily involved in this movement of the temperance movement, and they wanted to get rid of this alcohol from society. And see, so many people thought that they could just socially drink a little bit and it wouldn't affect them. And so the people began to say, no, we need total abstinence. Well, there's two different stories on where the word teetotalism came from. There's two different stories. One of the stories is that a guy in the meeting stuttered, and he said, "Have you?" And so he said, "No, we need to be total abstinent." And so teetotal. Others say he didn't stutter, but he said teetotal, and it was a way of emphasizing, almost like we would say today, like total with a capital T. I don't know which one's right, but we have adopted that over the years, and we just call anybody who abstains completely from alcohol to be teetotaler, okay? Now, I'm not saying that there's nobody out there who can drink alcohol on occasion and never get drunk. I'm not saying that there's anybody who, in fact, if you look up, it was interesting. I thought about bringing a whole bunch of statistics up here, but I'm sure everybody's familiar. You look around, you probably don't need to have all the statistics, but I looked up all these statistics from government websites, and of course they're not, just like anything, they're not going to condemn it, but they're going to just warn. Let me just show you the dangers. For one, a lot of people think, well, I can just have a couple drinks and I'll be okay. But these statistics show that people that are on certain medications, and if you look at all the medications, they're common medications that everybody takes. When they take that in comparison with the alcohol, a lot of times it has an adverse effect on what the medicine is. So like if you're taking something for depression and then you drink alcohol, even if it's just a little bit of alcohol, it can make you more depressed. Okay, and the statistics show that that's the case. And then on and on. Heart problems, if someone has heart problems and they're taking some kind of medicine for that and they drink alcohol, it can cause those problems. Not to mention really badly affect your liver and all this other stuff. Anyway, on just our government websites about the situation, it says all this, and it gives all these statistics about how many deaths are, like 1 out of 3, I believe 1 out of 3 car, death, what do you mean? Like car-related deaths, like an accident on the highway or whatever. I think it's 1 out of 3 of those deaths was alcohol-related. And, like real close to 30-some%. And in fact, one person every 50 minutes or something like that dies from alcohol-related injury on the road. So, and I've been to court for a speeding ticket or something like that and saw 5-6 people in front of me, all DUIs, and sometimes it was the judge said it's like their 3rd or 4th occurrence. So they're not taking it seriously. They're going out there and driving under the influence and what have you. And so clearly our society recognizes it's dangerous, you know. Even the alcohol manufacturers, Budweiser, their commercials, they'll say, now drink responsibly, you know, and they'll put all these advertisements on there trying to make it sound like, no, we want to promote just social drinking, just drink a little bit, but don't overdo it. And I read through all of those, and at the very end it says, now, there are some benefits to alcohol, to wine, for instance. And I've heard that. I've heard a lot of people say there are health benefits to drinking wine. And so they say at the very end, they said, now there are. But you just have to know all these other things. Make sure you're not on these medications, and make sure you're not pregnant, and make sure you're this. And then you have to know how much you can handle. If you're a woman that's this size, you can handle this much. All these little stipulations. And I'm thinking, why would you want to mess with it at all? You know, why would you even want to mess with it? I don't think that would be wise. Okay, so is there anyone out there that can drink alcohol on special occasions and never get drunk? I'm sure there are. Is there anybody that can grab a dog by the ears and not get bit? I'm sure there are some. So you could probably do it, and you might be able to provoke a king to anger and survive to tell about it. But we're talking about wisdom here in the book of Proverbs, and there's no doubt about this. There are dangers involved in alcohol, and I believe we'd be wise just to stay away totally. Okay, look at chapter 20, verse 1 again. This is our main text here. There's three things it says about wine and strong drink. It's kind of talking. By the way, do you know, I thought about doing this too, and I have all these great ideas and I don't do them. I thought about putting different cups up here with different amounts of water, maybe food coloring or something, grape juice in one of them. A can of beer has like 5% alcohol. You can drink, that's like a serving, I think, for like a can of beer. Now, most Christians I know, like, oh no, I don't touch beer. I just have a little glass of wine with my supper or before I go to bed or whatever. Well, do you know, just a tiny bit of wine, wine has like 12% alcohol. That's almost 3 times what a can of beer is. It's really high alcohol content in wine. So it's strong drink if it's drank that way. Now, there are scriptures. I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit, but there are scriptures in the Bible. We're not dealing with them tonight, but that would indicate that there was probably a type of common drink that was alcoholic. Some say they added water to it. Some say, that the content of alcohol was so low that people didn't get drunk or whatever, but there probably was some kind of alcoholic drink. There are some scriptures people will pull out and say, well, see, this is, and I agree. There are some in there that look like that is quite possibly the case. Excuse me. But I just don't think it's worth the risk, number one. And number two, it's not clear. You see, it's not completely clear, and it's not advantageous to do it. And so I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to come back to that idea, but there are places in the Bible that seem to do that. In other words, if you're looking for a scripture in the Bible that says, thou shalt not drink anything that contains any alcohol, you're not going to find that, okay? And that's the problem with the great debate that's all over on this society, is people are saying, look, that's not in here, and other people are saying, well, it doesn't have to be in there. You just should stay away from it. But here's what I want to say. We're talking in the book of Proverbs, and we're talking about wisdom, okay? And here's what it says about wine. It says that wine, or strong drink, wine is a mocker. Strong drink is raging. So we got mocker, and we got raging, and whosoever there is deceived thereby is not wise. So it's a mocker, it's raging, and it's a deceiver, all right? This is something to consider. Now, there are so many places, and here's another thing, is that, somebody could probably look and find about 4 passages of Scripture and say, look, a little wine's good for the belly. Look, and these days they had alcoholic beverage. They might be able to find 4 scriptures in the Bible where they can make a decent case for drinking a little bit of alcohol. But I can show you between 70 and 90 verses in the Bible that say, stay away from it. Don't be drunk, and you say, well, I think I I think I could do it without ever getting drunk. Well, maybe, but I can guarantee you'll never get drunk if you just stay away from it, right? And so that's where I always go in that argument. But if there's 70 verses that say, this stuff's bad, you ought to stay away from it, but there's 4 verses that don't say that, they're not super clear, but they don't say that, I'm not going to rest on those 4 and make all my judgments and my decisions based on that, okay? But I'm just going to look at a few scriptures here, and then we're going to look at, in those scriptures, this repeated theme. It's a mocker, it's raging, and it's a deceiver. Look at Proverbs 23. We were in this passage before, but we didn't cover this subject, so we get to look at it a little bit again. Proverbs 23, starting in verse 29. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling? Who hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? You see here, it's a mocker. It's raging. It's deceiving. A mocker means something that's like talking bad about you or lifting itself up and kind of putting you down or making fun of you, okay? And raging just has to do, you think like a raging lunatic? Raging, just uncontrollable. So you see here in this context, you got somebody who's babbling. They got wounds without a cause. They don't even know where they came from. They got sorrow. They got woe. Who hath these things? Look at verse 30. They that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. Look not upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. A lot of people that I've read after just say that is talking about the fermenting process of the wine. At the last it biteth like a serpent and stingeth like an adder. It's a deceiver. Thine eyes shall behold strange women, and thine heart shall utter perverse things. It's a mocker. It's raging. I'm adding these little things in, but yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or as he that lieth upon the top of a mast. I think what the picture that's given there is just this. I've never been drunk. I was telling, I think we were talking, Sandy and Brother E.S. I don't remember why we were talking about it, but talking about the fact that I wish I could say I never tasted alcohol my whole life, but when I was a little kid, before my parents got saved, they didn't have such convictions, and so they would have alcohol around from time to time, and I'd get me a little sip as a little kid, thinking that it made me big stuff, So I wish I could say that I never had tasted it, but I did as a little kid, and I remember thinking, it's really not that good. But I know I've never been drunk off of it. And so I don't know exactly what this feels like, but you can kind of get the idea like you're on the sea, just kind of, topsy-turvy and all. Really a descriptive text here. Verse 35. They have stricken me, shalt thou say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me, and I felt it not. When shall I awake? I will see it yet again. You think about somebody that wakes up, and they don't even remember what happened the night before, but all of a sudden they got these bruises, and they got these things that happened to them. They probably don't have any money in their pocket. I remember talking to somebody who said that he had a friend that he liked to hang around when he was drunk because he always gave him all of his money. He had no discretion. He just, here, have some money. And in fact, we had a neighbor when we were in Oklahoma City that would come across the street, and he had a bad drinking problem, and we always knew, hey, he's been drinking a little bit. And he'd start giving me all of his lawn equipment, and he'd go back, and next thing I know, I got a knock at the door. Hey, I brought some more stuff, and I'm thinking, man, tomorrow he's probably going to come over thinking I stole all of his stuff. But I guess that you just don't have any thinking, and so you just start giving everything away, and how dangerous of a thing. Habakkuk chapter 2. We don't go to Habakkuk very often. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 15. That's towards the end of the Old Testament. Habakkuk chapter 2. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 15. Woe unto him that giveth his neighbor drink, that putteth thy bottle to him, and maketh him drunken, also that thou mayest look on their nakedness. Now, I've always heard this warning. My whole life, I've heard preachers say to the ladies, if anyone ever tries to buy you a drink, they've got one thing in mind: stay away from them. They're trying to get your off your guard, where you're not thinking straight, so they can take advantage of you. But when you really read this text, here's what really bothers me. Woe unto him that giveth his neighbor drink, that putteth thy bottle to him, that maketh him drunken, also that thou mayest look on their nakedness. And who giveth to his neighbor drink? You're talking about a man giving a man a drink, and now we're talking about a whole different situation. And in my mind, immediately when I read that verse, goes back to Noah. Noah gets off the ark, and he gets drunk, and we don't know. The Bible spares us the details, thank the Lord. But Ham does something, and all we know is that he sees his father's nakedness because his father was drunk. And we don't understand all the went on right there, but the point is, there's definitely something related with this getting drunk, getting naked, not thinking straight, doing dumb things, and then later on you got your marriages ruined, or you lost your purity, or whatever the case, because of one night of drinking and having fun. Terrible thing. Proverbs chapter 31. It's all over the book of Proverbs, because we're talking about wisdom, and it's saying it's not wise to do it. Proverbs 31. But keep in mind our text there. It's raging. It's a mocker. It's a deceiver. Proverbs 31, starting in verse 4. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink, lest they drink and forget the law, and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. Give strong drink unto him that is ready to perish, and wine unto those that be of a heavy heart. Let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his misery no more. You know, one of the highest statistics of people that drink alcohol, like binge drink regularly, are people in the military. People that have seen war, and they're just not living in great conditions, and they're away from any kind of parents and wives and what have you, and they just try to drown their sorrows in alcohol. And then poor people who they work all day, and at the end of the day, they don't seem like they got any money, and they spend what little bit of money they have left on some alcohol so they can just forget about their troubles. It's a terrible. The end. What did it say? It bites like an adder. Stings like an asp. I think I used the right snakes there. But also you see there, give it to strong drink unto him that is ready to perish. Now there was a day where, you didn't have the expert, thank the Lord for those. What are they called that give you the drugs whenever you're getting a surgery or something? Anesthesiologists. Thank the Lord for them, right? Have you ever been in a major surgery? There was a day when they'd give you a piece of wood to put in between your teeth, and you bite down on it while they saw your arm off or something like that. And so what they would do is they'd pour some alcohol down them. Here, drink this until your senses are gone, and then bite down on this stick, and we'll perform surgery on you. Well, today, because there's an argument out there that says, well, how about drinking alcohol for medicinal purposes, And they'll use Timothy. Paul said, drink a little wine for the belly. And there's different even interpretations of that. And some people say, no, it's just talking about grape juice or whatever. But the point is, okay, so let's say that there's an argument to drink a strong drink for medicinal purposes. Because we all know we've taken drugs, morphine and stuff like that when we have a surgery that are a lot stronger than alcohol. Well, there's a couple different things to consider about that. One, I know of cases where people made that argument and said, hey, well, instead of taking these medications that the doctor would prescribe to me, I'll just drink alcohol. And they became drunks. Now, people get addicted to prescription drugs all the time too. But and that's a whole other message to talk about, I suppose. But we're talking about wine, alcoholic beverages. It just has this picture. There's your testimony to consider, and you don't want to get caught up in that. So, yes, if you buy NyQuil, it's got alcohol in it. I'm probably not going to say anything to you, unless you're drinking so much NyQuil that you're getting drunk. I don't think anybody in here is going to do that. If the doctor's giving you some kind of a substance that you lose all your senses, I understand that. You know, I've got to have some teeth worked on one of these days, and I don't want to go in there and feel all that pain. I want them to put me out. So I understand that. But we're talking about the wisdom of messing around with alcohol. And again, I don't think anybody in here has a problem with it, but we have to realize this. We have to be ready to give an answer, too, for what we believe, okay? So there are some indications. Here's what I was saying earlier in the Bible, that they may have been used as a harmless drink at times or for medicinal uses. And because those verses are in the Bible, you're not going to find the commandments of thou shalt not have anything with alcohol in it, right? Because there wasn't a reason for that kind of law. And it's interesting, in the Old Testament, when you read the law, really the law just kind of governed your actions for the most part. You know what I mean? So here's what I'm getting at. Does our government need to go back and reinstate prohibition and not have any alcohol? Well, when they tried that before, and I'm not up here trying to just say if it was good or bad to have prohibition, but when they tried that for 10, 13 years, whatever it was, crime increased. Bootleggers were everywhere. I mean, people that wanted to sin, they found ways to sin, and all they had was they had to employ more government agencies to monitor this stuff. And I think the IRS was in charge of. Anybody know that for sure? I think it was the IRS that was in charge of cracking down on the alcohol and everything. And later on, I think maybe it transferred over to somebody else, but. I'm just listening. I'm trying to get some wisdom here. So yeah, I don't believe that we need to go doing that. I mean, it's just kind of like, people are getting shot, so we need to control their guns, and we need to do all that. I think government makes plenty of laws already. Okay, we don't need more laws and more restrictions and all that. But here's the deal: if you're held accountable for your actions and you don't give alcohol or whatever substance they're involved in or whatever as an excuse. This person was mentally ill and they were on this medication, and so that's why they did it. It doesn't matter. If you hold somebody accountable for the crime that they did, then you don't have to worry about making all these laws for that. But you go through the Old Testament and you look at the laws, and you don't see like these laws about just don't let anybody have alcohol. In fact, there's some things in the law that I believe were clearly sinful things to do. They were wrong things to do, like polygamy, for instance. Yet there were laws governing on if you're doing that. How about divorce? Jesus clearly said it was wrong, but it was like over and over you find out it's wrong, and then it says, but if you do that, well then here's the things that you have to do. Okay, over and over in the scripture, there's liberties given, if you will. Okay, but what we're talking about is wisdom. Okay, you don't have to go, you show me the verse and here it says, thou shalt not. Why do you have to look for that? Why not just use your wisdom and common sense and say, it's bad. It's going to cause me to do stupid things. It's going to cause me to lose my guard. It's going to cause me to lose my testimony, to be mean to my family, and to do all this stuff. And so, it's not my job it's not the government's job to regulate that necessarily. I mean, there's some laws that they have to put in place to keep people safe. I understand. It's not my job as a pastor to tell you what you can do at your home. I'm not the governor of your home. But I believe it's my job to continue to preach the Bible and say you're a fool if you think you can mess around with that stuff and not get and it won't mess you up. I'll continue to preach against it. And here's the thing. I do believe I have this responsibility. If I know that somebody has a problem, like an addiction, or they're going out getting drunk and people know about that in the community or whatever, then I do believe biblically that we need to deal with it. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 5. We made reference to this passage many times, and it's a passage that I hope I never have to really pull this out in a private meeting. But I do believe the Bible makes it clear that there are times when we have to, we always want to try to do it with love and try to restore somebody and what have you, but there comes a time when a person actually has to be disciplined and even kicked out of the church if it need be for certain things. Chapter 5, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, 9 through 13. I wrote unto you in an epistle, this is Paul speaking, not to company with fornicators, yet not altogether with the fornicators of this world, or with the covetous, or extortioners, or with idolaters, for then must ye needs go out of the world. He's saying that you can't, outside these doors, you're going to find all kinds of people in all kinds of situations. I'm not telling you to avoid them because you need to give them the gospel. He says, but now I have written unto you not to keep company if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator. He calls himself a brother, okay? He's your brother, and he's in your church congregation, and he's a fornicator, or covetous, or an idolater, or a railer, or a drunkard, or an extortioner. With such one know not to eat. For what have I to do to judge them also that are without? Do ye not judge them that are within? But them that are without God judgeth. Therefore, put away from among yourselves that wicked person. Now, somebody preaches that text, and a lot of people think, well, that just doesn't sound loving. That just doesn't sound kind, and that just doesn't. Well, it is, and I do believe that everything should be done with the right heart, and it should be done with the spirit of wanting to restore them. I mean, I would never kick somebody out that said, hey, I need your help. I've got a bad addiction, a problem. I can't get control of it. Will you help me be restored? That's where you want people to be. But when it's somebody that just keeps, it's no big deal, I got this, and they refuse the instruction, there does come a point where, for the protection of your church body and their testimony in the community, and just to have a good conscience before the Lord, that such people would have to be even kicked out of the church. So we're talking about wisdom. And we don't want people grabbing dogs by the ears. That's a sin against yourself. We don't want anyone playing with snakes. Playing with fire, you're going to get burned. You know that phrase. But don't be deceived into thinking that you can handle just a little bit of alcohol or whatever. I believe the Bible makes it clear that that's a foolish thing to do. We need to practice total abstinence.